Grave of the Fireflies, directed by Isao Takahata and produced by Studio Ghibli. It is adapted from a novel of the same name written by Ikuuki Nakisaka. It's a film that's commonly said by many to be one of the saddest films ever made, but upon further viewing, it is not just about the deaths of Seita or Setsuko, but actually more about where someone's pride can lead to the destruction of others and themselves. In order to understand this film completely, it's important to view the film chronologically, as the characters embark on a desperate journey for survival in the aftermath of World War II with US bombings in Japan. The film opens in a metro station with Seita's lifeless body laying against a column, telling the audience from the get-go that the protagonist will die in the end. And then two station officers come over and pick up Setsuko's candy jar, laughing at it and tossing it. This scene seems to take place in the aftermath of the war, and it shows some people's ignorance of the past and its victims. The jar is tossed and we see a ghost of Setsuko appear. Her ashes have been released. The item itself is a symbol of innocence, something she would carry along with her to remind her of home. The song that plays is titled Hotaru, which translates to Tomb of the Fireflies, in other words, the title of the film. She stands there waiting for her brother to exit his body as well. This scene sets the tone for the remainder of the film, and reveals the central theme of the film, but can only be understood until the end. Once we see the two at the beginning of their story, they are just witnessing a bombing on their hometown, and their mother is severely injured while their father is in the military fighting the US Navy. They are now stuck into surviving on their own and finding a new home. Eventually the two end up at their aunt's, and are forced to live under her harsh conditions for them. Granted, they do mistreat her and show her no respect for the little grace she has given them. Seita shows for the first time how much pride he must have. He and his sister leave to an abandoned mine on the edge of the nearby lake. They've become completely independent, and now Seita has complete responsibility for food and keeping care of his sister. Soon they fall asleep one night to find hundreds of glowing fireflies flying in their shelter behind the netting. The two for the first time find hope in the fireflies. Only until the next morning, where we see Setsuko burying the fallen fireflies. There is a direct foreshadowing going on here, but once again not visible until you see the entire film. She does in fact have trouble coming to copes with their sudden deaths, and tells Seita she knows of their mother's death. This devastates Seita. He has done all he can to protect her, but no matter what he did, the horrors and all the loss of war always came back to her. Goes without further saying, yes, Seita made the wrong choices and has too much pride to ask for the help of others. But his intentions are pure, and he's doing all he can with a young mindset on the whole situation. So this ultimately prompts him to take matters in his own hands, stealing crops from the local farmers, because all this time they've actually been starving themselves and not foraging for food properly. Once again, the film is telling the viewer that their loss and pain is only a portion of their own doing. They are put into a situation of low survival and are forced to react at such a young age, so it can't be entirely Seita's fault. When speaking of Grave of the Fireflies, I can't help but mention the false accusations of the film as an anti-war movie. Not much dialogue at all speaks of how horrible the war was, or who the actual enemy is here. Here's a clip from the late great Roger Ebert to explain it further.
I met a group of Asian filmmakers from Vietnam at the Hawaii Film Festival about 15 years ago who had come over with a group of their films about the war, showing the other side of that war. And I noticed that in none of their films did they ever mention the United States. It was just the enemy. And I asked them about that, and they said, well, we've had so many enemies over the years. We've had China, we've had the French, the Americans, who knows who's next. The way we look at it is, you know, we are we, and then anyone who comes to attack us is the enemy, but their identity is not so important as the fact that they are our enemy. I think maybe this movie is saying that firebombing is not a very precise way of going after the enemy. It's a way to destroy morale, it's a way to break down a nation's will to resist, but at the same time, are we really thinking about people like this little brother and his even smaller sister when we drop those bombs? Or are we managing to objectify the Japanese as an evil race who deserve to have this happen to them?
War is only the backdrop of the film, or the situation that gives the characters conflict. Inner turmoil and survival, mental and physical, are much more clearly in focus. How does one's moral character affect others around them in unforeseen ways? For example, when Seita learns from the others that the war is ended, his initial reaction is that of surprise. To him, the Japanese Empire is fighting the good fight. He's more concerned with the outcome of the war than his own survival. This idea of pride and dignity has been explored extensively in Japanese cinema for decades, primarily in post-war era, but most famous example of this was in Kurosawa's masterpiece, Seven Samurai. During Kikucho's monologue in the film, he describes the samurai as a fake symbol of the warrior or pride itself, but the samurai are human just like the others. But Seita doesn't see it this way. He looks at the imperial army as without sin. He has strong nationalistic ties to his home country, probably because his father is serving in the military. To him, defeat is incomprehensible. Just like the samurai, he thinks of everything in the way of Bushido. The original author wrote the story as a semi-autobiography of his experiences during the war. He wrote himself as Seita, but chose to have Seita die as well because of all the pain he brought on his sister. He also equated pride as one of the reasons why his sister died of starvation. We slowly see Setsuko's well-being deteriorate over time. She's starving and so is Seita. No more food to steal from the farmers leaves Seita in denial. Eventually, Seita finds Setsuko laying there lifeless. The rock scene in particular is truly soul-crushing. Flashback to the opening scene of the film is where their journey comes to a close. Our two main leads have now passed on to the afterlife. They stand there in the marsh. The song that plays is entitled Hotaru, which translates to the Tomb of the Fireflies, or the main title. They are the fireflies in this post-war world. The light in their lives only lasted for so long. Then from there they sit at the beach staring into what looks like modern Tokyo. They are looking into the future, at a civilization that often forgets them, casts them from afar, a lasting image of history that should never be forgotten.